Let's begin today's Vanguard news with Bushiroad announcing out of nowhere that Vanguard Dear Days is getting a sequel. Yuki is coming back as the main character as well as new characters like the waifu voiced by Vanguard G's Verno, as well as some Argonavus voice actors, because it's not Bushiroad without using Vanguard to promote their talents, and the guy who voiced Dabi in My Hero Academia. The Divines cast will be in the game as well. I can't wait for someone to make a meme of Yuki and now pointing at each other. The game will have the updated rules like the 50 card main deck and energy generator, because they couldn't patch this in the first game without actually putting effort. The game will also have all the cards in standard up to DZLBT01 with newer sets coming as future paid DLC. No information if previous save files or paid DLC from the first game can be ported. But seeing as Bushiroad has decided to have their game division make this over Furyu, I'm confident enough to say that it won't. The game releases on the 30th of January next year, since they probably learned their lesson of not releasing a game a day before a mainline Pokemon game. Unfortunately, what they didn't learn is to not price it at $70 again. But if Dear Days can have more players than Concord and Dustborn combined, people will still buy the game regardless of its price. Liael Amorta finally gets a second wave of supports in DZBT05 and hopefully becomes a playable deck and not be relegated to cleaning up after Lured Zals in the bind zone. Swordsman of Twinstances tier, while in the back row rearguard lets you stand herself when your rearguard in the same column as her is bound by your grade 3 or higher Liael Vanguard's ability. Liael Amorta basically got herself a Dindrain clone, but an 8k booster isn't enough to give the time leaped unit a stronger pressure. Knight of Piercing Skies Panacitra, while on rearguard during your turn, gets 5k power if you have another copy of her in your bind zone. And while on rearguard, you can pay 3 energy and binding herself when your grade 3 or higher Liael Vanguard is placed to draw a card. She's literally a discount Idorus with worse conditions and rewards. She only gets 5k power instead of 10k. While she uses energy instead of soul, she also has to bind herself, which makes the draw less of a card advantage. And she can only use her second ability if you either ride Liael on your ride phase or you use Liael's divine skill. Sequence Wizard when placed on rearguard during your main phase lets you pay 1 counterblast if you have a grade 3 or higher Liael Vanguard to call up to 1 grade 3 or lower card from the top 5 cards of your deck. And while on rearguard, he gets 5k power when your other unit is bound by your Vanguard's ability. Then you can soul charge 1 card. Again, this is just a worse no beer, while the cool ability is actually better, being that it lets you look at the top 5 cards of your deck instead of 3. She only gets 5k power and cannot work in the battle phase to at least add a card to your hand. Not to mention that the option of randomly soul charging a card from the top of your deck is not a good idea. The anime even showed Hikari soul charging her over trigger with this ability. None of these new supports actually fix Liael Amorta's issues of needing multiple copies of her in your hand and drop zone. You're better off using the Keta pile if you want better rear guards. With the disappointments out of the way, it's time for the last 2 Harri cards in DZSS02. Darkside Princess while on rearguard lets you put her into your soul at the end of the battle she attacked. And when she's placed on rearguard from soul, while at Generation Break 1, she gets 10k power if you have a grade 3 or higher Harri Vanguard. She gets 15k power instead if you have 2 or more face-up cards in your G-zone. It pisses me off that Harri can use Upstream Dragon at its full potential. Meanwhile Chronogid can only use the first ability of this card. Outside of using Forward and Revertis, Chronogid can't even call this card out of the soul, so why even put the Harri restrictions? Dragon Masquerade Harri requires discarding a grade 3 Harri card to stride, while on Vanguard at Generation Break 2, you can pay 1 counterblast and putting 2 rear guards into your soul when he attacks a Vanguard to call up to 2 cards with different names from your soul. Then put up to 2 of your opponent's rear guards into their owner's soul. Cards called by this card's ability are put back into your soul at the end of your turn. By just having Flying Manticore, Harri can do up to 6 attacks in 1 turn. I can't fathom what kind of lunacy you can do with something like Deer Eagle and Upstream Dragon. Harri being quote unquote the better stride deck set over Nitros is kind of poetic in a sense, since nobody even cared for Harri back in the G series. Finally, Japan gets a new collab with Koro Koro Comics in the form of DZSS04. excluding Lyrical Monasteria. This set will have all of the 5 nations as well as a new Koro nation. No information if the English game will get this set, but knowing how collabs tend to take at least 6 months before being released in English due to licensing issues, this might come out to us when the Divines anime would be on its supposed 4th season. And that's assuming Bushiroad intends to release this in English when we still haven't even gotten VSPO. And that concludes this Vanguard news without the bullshit. Special thanks to my Patreon members for continuing to support my content creation. Be sure to subscribe and let me know in the comments if you wish for me to stream Dear Days 2 to waste my money on.